Hello everyone. So today we talk about Today we'll talk about chapter 21, the influence of monetary and fiscal policy on aggregate demand. So chapter 21, our last chapter. In this chapter we'll talk about the influence of monetary policy and fiscal policy on aggregate demand. So how the monetary policy and fiscal policy can affect the aggregate demand. And you remember from chapter 20 that we learned that when there is in the economy there is a recessionary gap and wages not falling, right? So in that case, government need to do something. Government could increase the aggregate demand, and by using the government purchase or reducing taxes, or maybe using the monetary policy, and then economy come back to equilibrium, right? So that we learned in the last class. And in this topic we'll learn how the government actually can increase the aggregate demand, right? The first start with just I want to refresh your memory probably that first start with eddy curve slope downward. That is, let me explain why the eddy curve slope downward. I explained it earlier in the last class, but I want to explain it again so that it refresh your memory. And 21.1 in your book, why eddy curve slope downward? Why this is downward sloping? Right? For instance, we draw an eddy curve. This is our aggregate demand curve, right? This is price and this is real GDP. And we know that when the price, let's say P1, then real GDP may be Q1. However, when the price level falls, let's say P1 to P2, then real GDP or quantity demanded of goods and services actually increase. So price level decrease, and we see that quantity demanded of goods and services increase. And why it happens? We had three explanations. Let me write it down here. When the price level falls, we see that aggregate demand increase. You can say it other way too, that if price level increase, then aggregate demand will fall, right? If you can go other way around too, price level increase, then aggregate demand falls. Let's use the first one. It's the same. Price level falls, aggregate demand increase. So why aggregate demand increase? There are three explanations. First explanation is the wealth effect. It means that even though the people, the consumer, their income's not changing, they're getting same amount of money. But since the price level falls, now actually they are rich. They have, because they can buy everything cheaper. So what happened then? Price level falls, and price level falls means consumption goes up. And as you can remember that, let me write it down here. Aggregate demand has four components: consumption, investment, government purchase, net exports. Government purchase is just a government decision, exogenous. But C, I, and X, if anything C, I, G, or NX goes up, then aggregate demand also increase, right? So here price level falls, we consume more, aggregate demand will increase. This is the wealth effect. So price falls, aggregate demand increase because of higher consumption. The second effect is interest rate effect. Interest rate effect. In case of interest rate effect, what happened that when the price level falls, right? When the price level falls, then you need actually less money to buy goods and services because now everything is cheaper. So you don't need to hold a lot of cash in your hand. So money demand falls. You are demanding less money. So when you're demanding less money, what will you do with the remaining money? You will keep all the money into the bank, into savings account, or maybe you will buy a bond. So banks getting a lot of money, so the interest rate will fall. Interest rate will fall. And when the interest rate falls, two things goes up. One is very important. One is investment goes up. Again, maybe consumption, maybe for durable goods. Some people want to buy a house. Some people want to buy, I don't know, car. But this is most important. The investment goes up. Then we know if this happens, then aggregate demand will increase. This is the interest rate effect. And number 3, the final one is exchange rate effect. Exchange rate effect. We know that in case of exchange rate, what happened? I'm sorry, I'm writing the exchange rate effect here, explaining here. I don't have enough space there. So what happened then, when the price level falls, we demand less money because we don't need a lot of money. So bank getting a lot of money, so interest rate in the United States falls. So when interest rate in the United States falls, so people think, okay, here the interest rate is low, why don't we invest in abroad? For instance, here I'm a specific example, let's say Canada. Let's say now you want to invest in abroad, maybe in Canada, for instance, let's say it's Canada. Let's say you want to invest in Canada because interest rate in the United States is lower. So when you want to invest in Canada, let's say what happened, what is happening here? So before price level falls, let's say before the price level falls, maybe I don't know, 1 USD equals 1 Canadian dollar. But now after the price level falls, then people want to invest in Canada because Canadian maybe interest rate is higher because US interest rate falls. So US dollar depreciate, Canadian dollar appreciate, value of the Canadian dollar increase because probably people want more Canadian dollar. So maybe the new exchange rate will be like this. So the new exchange rate will be, let's say 1 Canadian dollar equals 2 USD because everyone wants Canadian dollar. And when this happens, so foreigner, let's say Canadian, they will find the US goods is cheaper, then our export will increase. On the other hand, we'll find that Canadian goods is expensive. Why? Because in order to buy $1 Canadian goods, now you have to spend 2 USD. So import will fall. And when this thing happen, we know that net exchange will goes up. And we know net export is one component of aggregate demand. You can see in the equation, when the net export goes up, then aggregate demand will increase. So these are the three explanations when the price level falls, GDP increase or quantity demanded of goods and services increase. And you see there are three: wealth, interest, exchange rate effect. So which one is most important for the United States? The most important one is, first of all, the wealth effect doesn't have a lot of effect because people doesn't hold a lot of money. Exchange rate effect is very important for small country because in their GDP a big proportion come from export and import, net export. But in case of the United States, this one is the most important, interest rate effect. This is the most important. And that's why the central bank, they play a very important role in the US economy. By changing money supply or changing the interest rate, they can affect. So interest rate effect is very important. And this, you can learn the explanation in your book, 21.1. Now, let's talk about the theory of liquidity preference. And I'm going to erase it. I will talk about. Now we'll talk about 21A. 21A, the theory of liquidity preference. The theory of liquidity preference. So this has a Keynes theory. So what it's basically saying? It's basically saying that interest rate adjust to bring money supply and money demand into balance. You remember we learned at the very beginning of the semester that you are demanding goods and services and some suppliers supplying, right? So how it comes to the equilibrium? It comes equilibrium with the price, right? It's goods market. So interest rate actually also a kind of price in the money market. So interest rate adjusts between the demand and supply. So what is actually the liquidity preference theory is basically saying? That it's basically saying that we want to hold money, we want to demand money, or want to hold money in our hands so that we can buy goods and services. However, when the interest rate goes up, then probably we don't want to hold a lot of money because when the interest rate is high, we feel like that it's better to keep money in the bank so that we can earn interest. So the money demand falls. And money supply is fixed by the central bank. And now we'll see how the equilibrium interest rate, we get the equilibrium interest rate. Let's start with the money supply first. Money supply. We'll talk about money supply, then we'll talk about money demand, and we'll show you the equilibrium. So money supply is something like this. This is quantity of money. This is interest rate, and money supply is fixed, and it's just a decision by the central bank. They can increase the money supply, they can decrease the money supply. So this is money supply, this is fixed. Okay. Now let's talk about money demand. This is interesting, money demand. Money demand. Because there is an inverse relationship between money demand and the interest rate. Let me draw the diagram here. This is quantity of money. This is interest rate. Okay. Let's say the interest rate is, I don't know, maybe 3%. Then people want to hold $2 billion of money. Now interest rate, let's say, reduced to 1%. Let's say the interest rate now falls to 1%. Then people will think, okay, so interest rate is very low. What is the point of keeping money into the bank or buying bond rather than we keep in our hand money, because interest rate is very low, there is no point. So you demand more money, or simply speaking, interest rate falls, you go into the bank and you say, no, I want to withdraw my money because interest rate is low, is better, I want to keep in my hand. So you demand more money. Let's say now is $5 billion. So the relationship is inverse. We see that when the interest rate falls, money demand increase. And you can say it other way around too, that if interest rate increase, then money demand will fall. It's the same. If you know one-way relation, you can explain in other way. So the bottom line is when the interest rate falls, we demand more money. When the interest rate increase, we demand less money. Now let's explain the equilibrium in the market. Equilibrium in the money market. I'm going to use a diagram as figure 1 on page 456. Now I'll talk about the equilibrium. We talk about the supply, we talk about the demand. Now let's talk about the equilibrium in the money market. Oh, sorry. Equilibrium in the money market. Equilibrium in the money market. How it becomes the equilibrium? What is the price? Here the price is the interest rate. Equilibrium in the money market is, I'm using the diagram from figure 1. Is figure 1, page 456. Now I'll explain the equilibrium in the money market. So what is here, this is quantity of money, right? This is interest rate, and then this is our money demand, downward sloping, right? And we have money supply, fixed. This is our money supply, and this is our equilibrium interest rate and equilibrium. So in this point, money demand equals money supply. At this point, this is equilibrium. At this point, money demand equals money supply. This is I star. Let's say this is equilibrium interest rate. Okay. Now, let's say here exactly money demand equal money supply. Let's pick 2 other points. Let's say we pick another point. Let's say, I don't know, maybe this one. Let's pick a point here, I1. So in case of I1, what we found that excuse me. So in case of at interest rate is high, in this case we are seeing that money supply is greater than money demand. In this point, money supply is actually greater than money demand, means people holding more money. People holding more money in this point. People holding more money. People don't need that amount of money, but they're holding more money. Okay. Now, if people holding more money, let me explain. Let me erase the money supply curve. What happened? We'll see. People holding more money. I'm explaining I1. I1. So people holding more money. Okay, here money supply. Sorry, money supply is greater than money demand. People holding more money. People holding more money. Holding more money. So when you hold more money, you don't need that amount of money. What do you do? You have a surplus money you don't need. You want to get rid of this surplus money. How you want to get rid of surplus money? Maybe you just go to the bank and deposit in the bank, or maybe you will buy a bond. So get rid of surplus money maybe by depositing in the bank, or maybe or buying bond. Okay, so you want to get rid of surplus money, you deposit in the bank. So when you deposit in the bank or buy bond, let's say everyone now going to bank for depositing money. So what will happen? Bank is getting a lot of money. Everyone want to deposit. The interest rate falls. So interest rate here falls. Interest rate falls. And when the interest rates start falling, now again the people say, now interest rate is low. I don't want to keep the money in the bank. I want to hold my hand. I want to demand more money. So people start to demand more money. You see the interest is falling, money demand is increasing. Money demand is increasing. Money demand is increasing. And then finally, we reach here, and it comes to equilibrium, I star. Okay. This is the first scenario. It is above the equilibrium, right? You can also write it above the equilibrium. It's above the equilibrium. And we know this is good. Now let's talk about the below the equilibrium. What happened below the equilibrium? I have to erase this one. Let's talk about number 2, below the equilibrium. Or I just put it number 2 is equilibrium. Okay, number 2 is equilibrium. This is the I star. We already explained. I star here, money demand exactly equal money supply. This is equilibrium, or you can say it equilibrium. And now we'll talk about another point. This is below the equilibrium. Below the equilibrium. Below the equilibrium. Now let's talk about the below the equilibrium. So below the equilibrium is here. Let's say I pick this point, and this is I3. You can also write I2. I better write I3 is fine. In the below the equilibrium, we see that something interesting. In this point, money demand actually is higher than money supply. So if money demand is higher than money supply, you're demanding more money, but the supply is less. That means there is a shortage of money. So it means there is a shortage of money. Shortage of money. Now explain here, we go below the equilibrium, money demand is greater than money supply. It means there is a shortage of money. There is a shortage of money. So people have shortage of money. So if people have a shortage of money, you need a lot of money, right, to buy goods and services, but you don't have enough money. So what will you do? You'll go to the bank and you try to withdraw money from the bank because you need more money. Withdraw money from the bank. Money from bank. You'll go to bank to withdraw money. So when the bank sees that people are coming and withdrawing all the money, probably they have to they have to increase the interest rate because people are withdraw the money. So bank has to give some sort of incentive so that people don't withdraw the money. So interest rate will increase. Interest rate will increase. And you will see that here the interest rate is increasing. So when the interest rate increase, and again the same thing will happen, the interesting thing, when the interest rate increase, the people say, no, interest rate is high, let's withdraw less money, keep less money in our hand. So money demand falls. Money demand start to fall. And finally we back to our equilibrium again here, I star. So in this case, we reached equilibrium. So I explained above the equilibrium what happened, below the equilibrium, and then I start the video lecture. Good thing is that if you don't still get confused, you can go back. You don't, so I don't have to repeat it again. That's a good thing about the video lecture. And this is I used figure 1, page 456. Now I will explain downward slope of the eddy curve. B downward slope of the eddy curve. Why the eddy curve slope is downward? And to explain it, I'll use a figure in your book, figure 2 in your book, page number, it is 459. So money market and the slope of eddy curve. Money market and the slope of eddy curve. Why this slope is downward? So here we have money market. And then we have eddy curve, B eddy curve. Look carefully. Why the eddy curve slope downwards? That is, we know that P falls, right? Quantity demanded of goods and services falls, right? So how this is happening through the money market? How this is happening through the interest rate? You remember I told you the interest rate is the most important? Because I told you that consumption investment falls. Why falls? Because of the interest rate. Now see how this is happening. Now let's say this is our eddy curve. This is our eddy curve, downward sloping. This is P, this is real GDP or quantity demanded of goods and services. So here price level maybe P2, we demanded Q2 amount of goods and services, and then the price level increase. This is the first effect, price level increase. So when the price level increase P2 to P1, then quantity demanded falls. So price level increase, that quantity demanded falls. Okay. This was that is going to be the final stage. I'll come back here. Let's start with the first one. Price level increase. This is the first effect. Now look at the money market. I'll come back here. This is the final step. So the money market, this is our money supply. This is our interest rate, and this is the quantity of money. And this is our money demand. Let's say this is money demand. And this is our equilibrium interest rate, I star. And in this point, quantity money demand equals money supply. Okay. This is these things before the price level increase. Now the price level increase. So when the price level increase, now in order to buy goods and services, you need more money, right? Because the price level is higher. So what will happen then? Number two, that money demand will increase. You demand more money. But remember, the central bank actually is not increasing the money supply. It's fixed, but you are demanding more money because goods are expensive now. So money demand increase to the right, shift. Okay. So this is the second effect. And now, since the money demand increase, but the money supply is fixed, interest rate increase. New equilibrium interest rate is here. Interest rate increase to, let's say, I1. So number 3 effect is interest rate increase, because you're demanding more money, but the money supply is fixed, so the interest rate increase. And if you remember that I told you in the last class that the final effect is when the interest rate increase, we know that consumption falls, investment falls, especially the investment. This is the most important one. Then aggregate demand falls. This is the final effect. And now we are showing through the money market. So the bottom line is that price level increase, first effect, we demand more money. Second stage, we demand more money, but the money supply is fixed, interest rate increase. And when the interest rate increase, the final effect, consumption falls, investment falls, especially investment is most important, then AD falls. So AD comes to here, the final stage, it falls. So here we explain why the slope of AD curve is downward slope through the money market. Now we'll talk about 21C. 21C, changes in money supply. Changes in money supply. How changes in money supply affecting aggregate demand. You remember that when there is a recession, right, the wages not falling, so government can do something. The central bank actually can play a role. They can actually increase the money supply. When they increase the money supply, interest rate falls, aggregate demand actually increase. Now how this is happening? I will use figure 3, the money market, the figure 3, a monetary injection, figure 3. I'll use figure 3. The book page number is 460. Now we have money market. And then we have eddy curve. We want to see how money market affecting eddy curve, how it has an effect. So the money market, let's say this is quantity of money, right? This is interest rate, and this is money supply, and this is money demand, and this is, let's say, equilibrium interest rate, right? I star 1, equilibrium interest rate. Now let's draw an eddy curve. Eddy curve P1, Q1. Okay. Now here's the initial situation, right, in the money market and aggregate demand. So somehow the government or the central bank think that we need to increase the aggregate demand. How you can increase the aggregate demand? You can increase the aggregate demand through increasing the consumption, investment, government purchase, or net export. So how the money supply can affect the aggregate demand, or we can increase the aggregate demand? These steps are very simple. The monetary policy can affect. First step is you increase your money supply. So I increase the money supply. this is a right shift, you increase money supply 2. So the first step, you increase the money supply. So in the second step, we see that when the money supply increase, we get a new equilibrium, right? I2, new equilibrium, that means interest rate actually falls. In the second stage, since you increase money supply, interest rate falls. And we know that when the interest rate falls, what will happen? If interest rate falls, investment goes up. This is the most important thing, the investment. Consumption also goes up, but most important is investment. And when investment goes up and consumption increase, we know that aggregate demand shift to the right. So the aggregate demand, aggregate demand shift to the right. And this is Q2. So these are the third steps. So how the monetary policy affecting? Increasing the money supply, interest rate falls, investment goes up, consumption goes up, especially investment. So aggregate demand shift to the right. And this help actually in case of recession, because people who don't want to buy goods and services, the government need to take steps. Now, this is about the monetary policy. Government also can use the fiscal policy to influence the aggregate demand. What is fiscal policy? Fiscal policy is just, there are two tools. One is the government spending, another one is taxes. Let's talk about how fiscal policy influences aggregate demand. To how fiscal policy affect aggregate demand. 21.2 fiscal policy affecting aggregate demand. So what is fiscal policy? Fiscal policy actually has two tools. One is direct, one is government spending. Government can spend more money. It has a direct effect. Government can spend more money or less money, and you can remember that in AD equation there is C, right? We have an AD equation, right? That we have AD equals C plus I plus G plus NX. So you know that when the government purchase or government spend more money, then this is a direct effect. Let's say if G goes up, AD goes up. This is a direct effect. There is another one government can do. This is an indirect. Indirect. What government can do? Government can change the tax. Maybe government can reduce the income tax. Government can reduce the business tax. This has an indirect effect. How this is affecting? Because we know that when the tax falls, income tax falls, then your consumption will go up. Consumption go up means AD goes up. Or your business tax falls, that means investment goes up, and we know that if then AD goes up. So this one is not direct, this is indirect, because tax policy affecting consumption and investment. If tax reduced, then consumption goes up, AD goes up, tax reduced, business tax, investment goes up, aggregate demand goes up. So the fiscal policy, the government can use the direct or could be indirect. So here our AD curve, AD1, government can shift to the right or even shift to the left. We're just talking about only one side, right side. Or government can also reduce the expenditure, it's fine. But basically we are focusing on the right shift because in case of recession, when people doesn't have job, we're producing less than our capacity, government actually need to spend more money. So we are talking only one side. you can go other side too, because government can also reduce the expenditure, a shift to the left is fine. Now, the question is, let's start with the government purchase, the direct one. Let's start with the first one, the change in government purchase, direct one. Changes in government purchase, direct effect. Okay. Now we know that if the government, there is a shift, right? Shift in aggregate demand. If government increase expenditure, shift in aggregate demand. Now the question is, if let's say we are here, and how much the shift will be? It will be here, or it will be here, or it will be here. How much there will be shift? It depends on two factors. One factor is multiplier effect, and another one is crowding out effect. Crowding out effect. First one actually is positive. The second one is like a negative effect. How much it will shift, it depends on these two variables, multiplier effect and crowding out effect. Now let's start with the multiplier effect. B multiplier effect. Let's talk about the multiplier effect. So how the multiplier effect shift in the aggregate demand. Now I'll use the figure 4. Figure 4, page number 465. So this is our P. This is quantity demanded goods and services. This is our aggregate demand, right? AD1. Now let's say government want to spend more money. Now the government, look here carefully, in the first step, government let's say spend $20 billion. $20 billion. Maybe government buy goods and services, I don't know, from different company. Maybe the government buy computer, government spend money to build roads or anything. Government spend the money, buy goods and services from the company. Maybe the government purchase computer and other factors. So if the first thing happens, then we see that AD will shift to the right, 20 billion. So AD2 shift to the right by $20 billion. Okay. This is very clear, right? Now, so government spent $20 billion, AD shift by $20 billion. This is, we know, right? This is clear. Now, how the multiplier affecting? Look carefully. When the government spend money, $20 billion, let's say government buying a plane, government buying computer, actually this money goes back to firms. Let's say government buying this from company A, B, C, maybe government buying computer, government buying plane, or anything else from this company. So when government spend the money to this company, what will happen in this company employment will increase, wages will increase, the profit will increase because government buying those stuff. It will increase, it will increase, it will increase. And if you remember, actually in the very beginning of the semester, the circular diagram, when actually business make profit, in the business we supply the land, labor, capital, right? But when the business make profit, actually the money goes back to the household. How? maybe in the form of wages, in the form of profit, in the forms of dividends. So money actually goes back to household, the consumer. So employment rises, wages more, profit increase. So what will happen that it will increase the consumption. Consumption will increase. So when people buying again more goods and services, again this money will go back to company B, A, B, C. And again when the money goes back to the company, again more employment, more wages, more profit. So again this money will back to consumption. Again this it has a lot of effect. So government spend the money, company got the money, wages, profit, employment goes up, and then people make more consumption. Again this money goes to this company. Again is a continuous process. And then finally the AD shift to the maybe AD3. So this is a multiplier effect. So now let's say how much effect we'll see. We know that the first effect it increased 20 billion, but here how much? It depends on MPC. It depends on marginal propensity to consume. Let's say marginal propensity to consume is 75. It means when the people earn $1, they make consumption 75 cents, and 25 cents may be savings. So the first stage, it increased by 20 billion. In the second stage, people make consumption 75%. So 20 billion, it goes again in the second stage by 15 billion. Now again 15 billion come back to household. Now again people make 75 cents of 15 billion. And again it increased AD by 11.25. Again number 4, again 75 cents, sorry 75%, 11.25, and then it goes to 8.4375. So it is a continuous process. And actually we have a simple formula we can use. The simple formula, how much the multiplier effect, that is a formula, is very simple. M equals 1 minus MPC, that is 1 minus 1.0.75. So it's going to be 4, multiplier is 4. So if the government purchased $20 billion, the effect will be total $80 billion. So like you don't have to go step by step like this. It's just a formula. You can see this. This is an $80 billion effect. So in order to summarize, is government spent 20 billion. First, it increased by 20 billion, but again, it goes back to the farm. Again, goes to the consumption. 75%. It goes on, and by using a formula, simple, we can see actual effect will be $80 billion. So this is called multiplier effect. So you spend $20 billion, but aggregate demand total shift by here $80 billion. Now this is something positive. Now let's talk about the negative effect, crowding out effect. Crowding out effect 21.2e. 21.2e. This is negative effect. Actually, you see why this is negative effect. Crowding out effect. Crowding out effects. I'll use a figure in figure 5. The page number is 467. 467. So we have a money market. and we have eddy curve. Now, this is quantity of money, and then we have money demand, right? And this is the equilibrium interest rate. Sorry, let me draw the supply curve. This is money supply. And in this point, money demand equals money supply. This is equilibrium I star 1. And aggregate demand is here. This is eddy curve, eddy 1. This is quantity demanded of goods and services. This is price. Now, let's say government spend $20 billion. The first step, government purchased $20 billion. So this is a good thing. AD shift to the right. Okay. So AD shift to the right. Let's say AD shift to the here. 82. This is a good thing. Sorry. Okay. Now, what is happening? This is actually is crowding out effect. It's a negative effect. So you remember I just explained to you that AD increase, that people have more people making more wages, profit, right? Now you want to consume, you want to make more consumption. So what happened when you want to actually want to make more consumption? That means you need more money in your hand to buy goods and services. That means you actually increase the money demand even though the money supply is fixed. So next is number 2, that money demand will increase. So when the money demand increase, money supply is fixed, then what will happen? Because people are demanding more money, right? So people don't want to keep money in the bank. People want to keep the money in their hand. So bank need to keep the interest rate high so that people feel it attractive. So you see here, interest rate will increase. Number 3 is interest rate will increase. And if you remember that if interest rate increase, there are 2 effects. One is the most important one. There's investment falls. This is the most important one. And also consumption falls. And we know that when the investment and consumption falls, final step, AD will fall. Because consumption and investment are the component of aggregate demand. So the initial shift, it was $20 billion, and it come back. It's funny. It's come back to 83. 83. So in the previous one, we said that you spent $20 billion, and that finally it has an effect $80 billion. But here we are saying reverse. You spent $20 billion, and it finally come back to less than $20 billion. So the final question is, how much we'll see the effect? And its total effect actually depends on crowding out and multiplier effect. We have to see which one is higher. If multiplier effect is higher, it has more effect. So it depends on 2 factors. Then we'll see what is the actual effect we can see. Now we talk about changes in income taxes or taxes. You can also talk about the business taxes too. Well, here we talk about only, let's see, in your book it is talking about taxation. They're talking about the personal tax. We can talk about the business tax too. Let's talk about taxes. Now 21.2 changes in taxes. 21.2F changes in taxes. Is page number 468. So it's very simple that by tax also is a I don't know, tax also like the fiscal policy, but I told you tax is not something direct, it's indirect effect. So we know that when tax reduce, we know we have more savings, we have more consumption, right? So when the consumption high, AD will high. And also the same, there could be two effects. One is a multiplier effect. Maybe like the way I explain again, because when the AD goes up, aggregate demand, wages, profit, employment goes up, right? This goes up. And this happen, the consumption again go up, and when the consumption go up, again this money go back to the firms, again wages, profit, employment goes up, and again AD goes up. The similar explanation. And another explanation, the similar that you explain here, crowding out effect. Crowding out effect. Is the same because tax falls, right? Income tax falls, consumption increase. When the consumption increase, you will demand more money. You are demanding more money, so people don't want not keeping the money into the bank. Bank need to pay, give you some things so that you can actually want to keep the money in the bank. So interest rate will increase, and we know that when the interest rate increase, investment falls, also consumption falls, and then aggregate demand falls. So the same explanation, the crowding effect and the multiplier effect, the way we explain the government purchase. Now you see that actually the monetary policy and the fiscal policy both has an effect. Sometimes the government and the central bank need to use a policy so that there is a stability in the economy. For instance, let me explain here what do you mean. So government can use the both policy to maintain the stability in the economy. One is fiscal policy, and as you can remember, the fiscal policy is government purchase and tax. Another is monetary policy. That means increasing the money supply, right? So how we can use the both policy in order to maintain the stability in the country. Let's say government fiscal policy, government increase the taxes. So when the government increase the taxes, you know that you can also talk about the business taxes too. Let's say personal taxes, then the consumption will fall because tax is high, consumption falls, and we know that AD falls. And when the AD falls, we know that aggregate demand falls. That means the firms, wages, employment, profit also falls. And again, AD falls, and it has something not good for economy. So to offset this situation, central bank can follow a counter policy. Let's say central bank can increase the money supply. When the central bank money supply, interest rate will fall. When the interest rate falls, we know the investment will increase, consumption will increase, and this happen, then aggregate demand will increase. When aggregate demand increase, wages increase, employment increase, and the profit increase. So on the one hand, because of the central government decision, aggregate demand falls. On the other hand, we use another policy, monetary policy, so that aggregate demand increase. So sometimes we need to use the both policy to maintain the stability in the economy. So this is all about chapter 21. We use the fiscal policy and the monetary policy in order to maintain the stability of the economy. And I want to go back to the chapter 20 and I want to review one thing so that you all understand why the monetary policy and the fiscal policy is important. I'm going back to chapter 20 to draw a diagram and to see why this is happening. So I'm going back now, chapter 20, and we start chapter 21 is done. Now go back to chapter 20. Whatever we learn lesson here, we'll use the lesson to implement in chapter 20. So some economists believe that you don't have to do anything. Government doesn't have to do anything. Central bank doesn't have to do anything if economy is in recession. And we know that recession is not good, right? People doesn't have job, investment falls, output falls. So what they're saying is self-regulating economy. What they believe is something like this. What they believe something like this. Suppose economy is in recessionary gap. Let's say this is P, this is real GDP, right? And this is our aggregate demand. Aggregate demand. This is our long run aggregate supply. We already explained what is long run aggregate supply. And then we have a short run aggregate supply. Short run aggregate supply 1, we have an equilibrium 1. Qn is natural, Q1, and this is P1. So here Qn means the natural GDP. You use all your land, labor, capital, all the resources. Let's say you can produce, I don't know, maybe 100 units of goods and services. However, now you are producing only Q1 because maybe you couldn't use all your resources. Some people are unemployed. This is not full employment. And you're producing less. And this is a recessionary gap. It is not for the economy because you're producing less even though you have more resource. People need job, but they're not getting job. So this is a recessionary gap. So people who believe that central bank doesn't need to do anything, and here Q1 less than Qn, so they said there is surplus in the labor market. There is a surplus in the labor market. Surplus in the labor market. They believe there is surplus in the, because it's true, there is surplus in the labor market. So when there is a surplus in the labor market, people doesn't have a job, they're looking for a job, they say, okay, we are willing to work at lower wages. So wages falls. And wages, when the falls, we know that now the supplier will see that production cost is lower, they will increase the supply, and it will increase until we get here. Short run aggregate supply, and we come back to equilibrium, number 2. This is what people believe, that central bank doesn't have to do anything. But the problem is, here is the questions. What if the wages don't fall? Question. What if wages don't fall? Actually, wages don't fall usually in the short term because there is a labor union, or sometimes firm has a different policy. Let's say firm A can use 2 policy. One policy is that firm pay $20, and $20 is the actually like say now the wages is $20. They can hire 60 people and they will fire 20 people. They will ask the employer, look, we can't sell as much as we used to sell. we are still paying $20, but they released 20 workers. These 20 people are not happy because they lost their job, but they can't do anything to the firm. 60 people is still in the firm, they're happy, they're paying $20. Another thing firm could do, reduce the salary to 15 and keep all the employee. Now the problem is, now all the employee, 80 employee, they're not happy, and this is not good for the firm. So it's better firm use this policy. Keep $20 and fire 20 people, keep 60 people. So wages don't fall. So Keynes here argued that in this case, now the government can help to solve this issue because wages not falling, we're not coming back to equilibrium. So government can help. How the government can help? Because it's not self-regulating. We know that government can help. We already learned from chapter 21 and using the lesson here. Let's say this is our price level. This is aggregate demand, right? AD, this is aggregate demand. In the previous one, we are saying that supply creates its own demand because wages fall, but we are saying that no, it's not happening, wages not falling. This is long run aggregate supply, right? And we have a short run aggregate supply is here. Short run aggregate supply here. We are moving, is making point 1. This is natural. Q1, and this is Q1 at point 1. We are in recessionary gap, and we found that we're producing less than our capacity, so Q1 is less than Qn. So, and if wages fall, we could move to 2 short-run aggregate supply here, it will be fine, but wages not falling. So the Keynes argue that we can actually, now the government can help. How the government can help? Government can increase aggregate demand. How the government can increase the aggregate demand? We already learned using the fiscal policy. Fiscal policy, what the fiscal policy says, government probably can increase the government purchase, is a direct effect, AD will shift, or maybe indirect, reduce the taxes. When they reduce the taxes, we know that consumption will go up, investment will go up, and the AD shift. This is one way. Another way is that government can use the monetary policy to increase the aggregate demand. Government increase the money supply. When the money supply increase, we know that interest rate will fall. When the interest rate falls, consumption increase, investment increase, then we know that AD will shift. So government can use both policy or one policy to shift to the aggregate demand, and this is actually more effective. And then aggregate demand shift to the here, 82, then we come back to equilibrium. This is our equilibrium by using the government policy. So in chapter 21 that we learn how the government can shift the aggregate demand, we use the same concept to show the effect in this diagram. So this is all about chapter 21 and ending of chapter 20. I try all my best so that you can actually learn the economics, especially for chapter 20 and chapter 21. I want to remind that in chapter 20 you have actually 2 homework instead of 1. Chapter 21 is 1 homework, and chapter 20 and chapter 21 you have to read the book, and if one enjoy the lecture you can watch the video several times, and you have to draw the diagram so that it will make sense. So I try all my best, and please work harder for the final, and good luck for the final exam. Maybe I spend 1 or 2 minutes to explain the final exam again. Give me a minute. So in the final exam, like say, okay, we have a different section. Anyway, I have already posted in the announcement section. So there are 5 topics. You have to also work on homework, do the homework several times, and also you'll find similar question like homework. So work harder. If you have any question, you just let me know. Thank you so much.